when those hotels with migrants in them were attacked by really bad people. Someone will then bring a case to take them to court. And we've got this reform movement sort of creeping up. Even the Labour Party that I belong to, when I got interested in politics, my member of parliament, with whom
Hello, Leslie. It's very nice to have you on my podcast. And today we're in Westminster to film this. I was just wondering whether you can tell everyone what specifically are you focusing on doing in Westminster as a Lord? What are your main goals and topics you're covering?
Well, first of all, it's nice to be here, Volodymyr, and even nicer to see you. We've worked together for quite a while. Well, I've been a member of the House of Lords for 20 years, and I have focused over the 20 years on things like education, civil society, and so on and so forth. But in recent times, I've had front bench duties to do for the Labour Party, because I should just say that I'm a member of the Labour Party.
Yeah.
Yes. And front bench duties for digital, culture, media and sport. I was the shadow minister before the election, and also shadow minister for Wales, because I'm from Wales. I am a Welshman. So all of that. But since COVID, which stopped all of that, I have picked up in a new role. I've been concentrating on digital and communications on the one hand, and I've been elected by the British Parliament to go to Strasbourg as part of the delegation of this Parliament to the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which brings all 46 countries of Europe together to talk about mutual problems related to, and these are, to answer your question, these are human rights, the rule of law, democracy. So that's what I'm interested in now, more than anything else,
Yeah. And I have been working in the Council of Europe for quite a while now, for around a year. If I go this winter, is going to be my 5th time going. And yes, it's the common ground for us. And I know some of the goals Ukrainian delegation is pursuing in their presence in the Council of Europe. But I was wondering what are the main things that British delegation focuses on, because as they have left the EU with Brexit, it might be very interesting. What are they looking to achieve as being part of this organization?
The Council of Europe, of course, is quite different from the European Union, which was more about economics and politics, whereas this is the universal support for the Declaration of Human Rights and the United Nations and for the rule of law. So, and Britain pretty much helped to set it all up. So I'm very interested in those particular subjects. And as far as Britain is concerned, one of our big problems, and I think it is, you will confirm this to me, it's migration is the big subject of the day. And in Britain we have a coast and people come in small boats. In Ukraine you don't have quite the same thing, but you do have the border with Russia, the border with Poland, the border with other countries. So crossing borders is one of the big things, and therefore migration is a big subject, and I'm on the Council of Europe's Migration Committee, and I think that's where we met, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's a very interesting topic right there, because I think nowadays pretty much everyone has some opinion about migration and the policies that their government should pursue in terms of limiting migration or letting it, fostering even more. But with Ukraine, I think not many people know that there were actually a lot of black people coming to study in cities like Kharkiv, my city, because we have very nice universities and they're pretty cheap for the people who can't afford going to Europe but would like to get studying, because Ukraine has quite a good quality of studying. And I was wondering, as a labor lord, what what are the measures you think your government should take, whether it should limit migration or whether it should be the same, whether it's on the right track?
Well, I've been a member of the Council of Europe for 20 years, and nearly all of that, certainly in the last 15 years, we've had a conservative government with a very conservative understanding of migration. And they have wanted to stop people coming and to put a cap on the numbers and so on. And actually they have, haven't put their best energy into putting the United Nations Convention of 1951 into force. Because that convention says that everybody has a right to seek, to be a refugee, to ask for shelter. Not everybody is entitled to have it, but because they haven't dealt with all of that, the previous government has allowed 70,000 people to go into the waiting list and has had to accommodate them in hotels. And it's terrifically expensive to keep them there. So we've got a problem. So my government, because that's what you asked me about, my government is dealing first of all with the 70,000 people in hotels and trying to get them processed to decide which ones have entitlement to stay and which ones should be deported. And the longer it takes, the harder it is. You know, of those people who came, 60% of them have been more than 6 months in hotels, and 30% more than 12 months in hotels. Well, the longer it goes, the harder it is to do the assessment, and the more costly it is for the national budget. Think what we could be spending all that money on. So it is a tricky area, and I'm very glad that I've recently been re-elected, because you have to be elected to go onto the delegation, to go back to Strasbourg, and shortly I'll be taking up my position again and arguing this case all over again.
Yeah. To me, it's pretty clear, though, that migration, healthy migration, like Ukrainians who come in, other nations, just brings in a lot of benefits for the country. It improves the economy and raises a lot of money. But I was interested to hear your take on illegal migration, whether we should be allowing people to come in illegally.
Well, I think, well, first of all, let me deal with the people who come from Ukraine, because the conservative government always pointed to that, proving that they were in favor of migration. There's a very large number of Ukrainians here. But there are two things that make Ukrainian migrants quite different from the others. Number one is that they come and live with families and are accommodated and given opportunities to integrate. For most other migrants, that isn't the case. They go into hotels and are kept there until they're assessed. And secondly, the Ukrainians who come, the large majority of them are just waiting for the war to be over so they can go home again. And again, that's different from the migrations that we're thinking about now. They're coming because there's famine in Africa, or because there's political persecution, or their religion is not acceptable, or whatever they're fleeing from. And yes, they do bring, and I believe that personally. I know so many people who come to this country from other countries, and they contribute hugely to what's happening in this country, and positively. But they still have to be, as they arrive, we have to find homes for them. We have to find money to keep them. We have to offer them work and so on. And at a time when the economy is not doing very well, it can be quite difficult for politicians to allow that to happen. Yes.
And you have also told me that you're dealing with digital questions.
Yes. Yes.
It's interesting, right? Because many people looking at older people think that they don't really have much idea about digital digital stuff. This is what actually first time you told me that you're dealing with digital stuff. I remember my face. I was like that's very interesting. How can you do that?
Well, that's a very good question. But what we discovered in one of our reports, the digital committee that I was on, a select committee, was that young people too are rather limited in their uses, their understanding of digital.
Yeah, I think so.
That is, what young people use digital for is what they want, like streaming and keeping in touch, social media and stuff like that. But in terms of the skills needed to develop computer science, they are as much out of the picture as us older people half the time. So, and as we've discovered looking at our economy, in the future, we're going to need a much more highly skilled workforce, not just streaming and listening to their favorite music. We need them to compute and to build computing systems. And they are as bad as us older people. But what us older people have managed over the years also is to understand that the very best technology is wonderful to have as long as it's used for the purposes that it's available for. Whereas what happens is that in times of war, you get, for example, you get governments and politicians and armies taking the technology and applying it to drones, for example, and computerized warfare and cyber attacks. I mean, the digital field lends itself to violence and armed conflict as much as it does to helping us live our daily lives better. Now, those are the questions I'm interested in. That's my interest in the digital, the ethical. I want science to help the world to become a better place. But those who are in the struggle for power want the technology to help them get more power and more influence. Russia against Ukraine is one example.
But with digital part of our lives, I feel like the main concern that it is incredibly hard to control how it is all developing, because as we make all the efforts we can to limit or to limit all the harm that it can bring, it will produce 10 more ways that it can
you're quite right. You're
change our lives completely.
You're absolutely right. And when I think, for example, we just got a new Act of Parliament in Britain called the Online Safety Act. It took us 5 years to develop it.
What is it about?
It's all about protecting people from the worst things that happen through technology. It's keeping people safe when they're online. That's what it's about. Online Safety Act. But the point is, it took us 5 years to produce it, a further year to produce the regulatory powers that will control its use. And by the time we're doing all that, the technology will have advanced so that what we've taken 6 years to do will not be very useful. It'll have been overtaken by events. And I just yearn to have people from within the technology field who understand computers, because it's their daily work, to help us who are not in that world to make good decisions about regulating. Now, in America at the moment, we've got Donald Trump about to sort of blow his trumpet, and we've got all the kind of leaders of the technology fields over there, which are the strongest in the world, rapidly lining up behind him, whether it's Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or whoever, and all the things we fought hard to help us control the use of platforms and technology. Suddenly, the controls are being taken off, and you can say what you like. You can incite people to hatred. You can say what you like. Free speech is what they call it, but it's hateful speech, it's hurtful speech, and it's dangerous speech. So I worry about all those things. I really do.
Well, in my opinion, free speech should be allowed as long as it does not harm anyone. Right. Then it's free speech. And I'm just not sure where the world is going to go with these changes. But I was wondering, there was this one point which I wanted to get across. What did you mean by safety online? Do you mean it should not be allowed to insult anyone based on their race, on their identity, or their sexuality? Or does that mean that we will be keeping people safe from their data being used by Instagram, by Facebook, by
Well,
TikTok?
it is a bit. It's in all those fields, but
So both.
first of all, we do have laws, and anything that that social media or technology is used for that contravenes our laws will be unlawful. We're looking at, and it's a subjective thing, what might harm people, but still be within the laws.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to make a judgment about that. But we're very, very clear that our Equality Act in the United Kingdom, which actually defines what constitutes hateful speech or harmful intentions or dangerous sort of ways of speaking, it's all defined in that law, the
Yeah.
Equality Act of 2010. And so we will judge what happens against the requirements of that law. So once again, if it's against the law, then it's against the law, if it's online or if it's not online. But it's not to do with free speech, really. I mean, freedoms are freedoms, but they come with limitations.
Yeah.
We can't use our freedom to hurt and harm people, whether in speech or in action. And so it's that balance that has to be sought, and it is difficult.
I'm really curious, I think, and most of the people in the world, in America especially now, are curious, how do you even define hate speech? Is that not something, because most of the people think that it's something very vague that basically comes down to whether you can't really know whether you have just produced hate speech.
Well, there will be instances where it's very grey, and therefore you can't decide. It's as difficult as you just said. But when Elon Musk, for example, praises a man called Robinson, it's very,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, it's ridiculous. So it's a question of judging when that line has been crossed. And there are frameworks of criteria that are in place to help us to make those judgments. And what's more, once our Act of Parliament is being implemented, there will be cases in the courts, and the judges in the courts will have to decide whether it is harmful or not. And those judgments in our common law will build up a body of experience about how to handle these things in the future. So that's how it'll work. But it does take a long time, and the technology will simply be different by the time we start to put these things into practice. It's not easy.
Yeah, so it's up to judges to decide whether it's hate speech or not.
Well, it will. When somebody alleges that people have been incited to hatred, like, for example, the stuff that happened in Middlesbrough in the summer, when those hotels with migrants in them were attacked by really bad people, someone will then bring a case to take them to court because they smashed windows, they turned police cars over and burned them and so on, they shouted slogans, all that kind of stuff. And somebody will take them to court, and in court, the judgment will have to be made. Did they cross the line? Was there hatred that they perpetrated, or are we exaggerating? And as the judgments are made, so that will set a precedent for the next time it happens, because that's how our law, which I think is quite different from your law, works. And so it'll take 4 or 5 years for those laws to begin to accumulate a body of opinion that allows us quite easily to detect which is harmful and which isn't harmful.
So is this another solution to the length of this process, that we are going to have a few cases which we are going to base our future decisions on? Yep. Is it going to speed up the process of passing?
Well, time will tell. I mean, I think that some things will be very easy to decide because they are against the law and so on, and there's not going to be much problem. But in terms of that delicate business of deciding when the line has been crossed, that's what I'm talking. Those cases that are somewhere in the middle, and you got your opinion, I got my opinion, and we have to decide what's happening. When they get taken to court, the judge will consider all the evidence, go through it all, there'll be cross-questioning of people, and out of that process will come a judgment that you're right or that I'm right. And once that judgment is on the statute book, then it becomes the lead, because subsequent cases will refer to that. That's what they did in that case. Now let's do it in this case. So it evolves. That's our legal system.
Yeah. With Donald Trump coming to power, I know personally that you're very critical of him.
I am.
And you have just laid out to me that you're very afraid of concerned about what will happen potentially to media safety, or to means like Instagram, Facebook, whether it will be used to spread hatred even further. But what are the other things that you're concerned about with Donald Trump? What do you think is the main reason, was the main reason not to choose him?
Well, first of all, he is a felon who has been convicted and sentenced for a crime. In this country, we have just had to have one of our politicians resign her office because she has an auntie who in Bangladesh was a powerful person, and it's alleged that there's a conflict of interest. Our politician, because she's closely related to a politician in Bangladesh, that's a conflict of interest, so she's had to resign. Now, in America, you have Donald Trump, who's not only connected to someone who's committed a crime, but has committed a crime himself. There's no question of him resigning at all. And there are other cases that they've dropped, which could have showed that he's even more of a criminal than we've seen thus far. So first of all, he's misogynistic, he's hateful, he despises immigrants. And I've lived in Haiti for 10 years. I love Haiti and Haitians and Haitian culture. And he's threatening to deport all of them.
And the comments he has made about Haiti.
In his campaign, yes. I mean,
in the debate.
In the debate, he said that in Springfield, Ohio, Haitians are eating the cats and dogs, the pets of their neighbors. Now, in Springfield, Ohio, it's been denied by every authority again and again and again, but he still goes on saying it in order to increase the sense of, you talked about how you recognize when people hate each other. Well, that's hatred in my book, all right? So that's the second thing. The third thing is I look at Haiti, which is a country in chaos. How can you have a country in such chaos, 90 minutes flying time from the United States of America? How? Well, because America's messed it up. America has taken all the profits out of it. America has, for well over 100 years, sort of done the worst it can to take all the profits out of Haiti, leaving it floundering. And Haiti now is in a total mess. And what's going to happen? Donald Trump is going to send tens of thousands of Haitians back to Haiti. There's already 11 million people there. Haiti is the same size as the country I was born in, Wales. Wales has 2.5 million people. Haiti has 11 million people. How are they going to take hundreds of thousands more? And they're also getting from the Dominican Republic another 300,000 people deported. I mean, you're going to have people starve to death. You're going to have the whole thing in a mess. You're going to have violence and gang warfare and all the rest of it. And it could be stopped by Donald Trump, and it should be stopped by the American government. So, of course, I'm angry. You've now touched a nerve, young Volodymyr, you have. Because it doesn't seem fair to me that someone as strong as the American leadership could use its power against a country that is so weak as poor old Haiti is.
Of course, in terms of deporting, many experts and just people say that there is going to be not only, it doesn't only come to the unethical question. It only involves a big cost that the US is going to pay for deporting all of the people Trump wants to deport. And even if he's going to not deport all of them, it's still going to cost him a lot. But something that people suggest that is going to cost US even more is his policy with tariffs.
With
tariffs.
Terrorism, yes. Well,
tariffs.
Yes, well, we'll wait and see on that. Already it seems as if he's been able to make certain noises in the discussion about the conflict between Israel and Gaza.
No, I meant economic policies on tariffs.
Oh, economic. Oh, you mean,
Yeah.
oh, tariffs.
Tariffs.
Tariffs. Oh, I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Yes. Oh, no. Well, I mean, that's what's going to happen. He's going to take an isolationist stance. He's going to isolate America from the world economy, and make it hugely expensive for people who want to export goods to the United States of America. And he's talked about huge tariffs for Canada, for example. Poor Canada. You know, they're right next door.
Yeah.
And from China, especially China. And what will happen is that that'll add to the cost of the products for ordinary people as well.
Yeah. And of course he has talked about plenty of issues. But yeah, I wonder, why do you think if the information about Trump is so open and everybody pretty much knows what he is, why do you think he has been chosen as the president?
Well, now
of the US?
that is the $64,000 question to ask, because I do not know. Take, for example, I am a Christian.
Yeah, there are multiple reasons, but
No, I am a Christian, and in the church that I belong to in the United States of America has split between those who believe that you should accept gay and lesbian people and those who should. Now, on that issue, sexual identity, the church has split.
Methodist, just to be
The
clear.
Methodist
Yeah.
Church. But you've got a president who's not only kind of offended against that, he lies, he has sexual misdemeanors, he hates women, all of those things. And yet the same people who divided in the church vote for him. I can't understand it. I cannot understand it. And I've got into trouble for telling the Americans, or the American Methodists, what I feel about that, or at least I haven't told them what I feel about it. I've asked them to explain to me, to help me to understand what I don't know.
People who vote for Trump.
People who vote for
Yeah.
Trump, yes.
What did they say then?
Well, they've given me no answer at all. I think that there is a crisis going on, however, in democracies generally. As the experience of democracy has developed over the decades, say since the Second World War particularly, the breakdown of communism and all the rest of it, I do believe that the political class has become more and more distant from the people that they govern. And the people that they govern feel that difference terribly. And so if you get someone with a big mouth and who can speak pub language, speaks to ordinary Americans, they feel, he's one of us. See, instead of rather posh phrases and highfalutin jargon from people who went to university and who can't understand working people. And I think there's that happening in Britain as well, by the way. And we've got this reform movement sort of creeping up. Even the Labour Party that I belong to, when I got interested in politics, my member of parliament, with whom I used to talk as a teenager, my member of parliament had begun his life working down a coal mine. And he'd worked himself up and taught himself at school. He never went to university. But when he went into government post-war, 1945, as a member of parliament for my town, and he was offered the Foreign Office to represent Britain abroad, he said, no, I want to do work and pensions. I want in government to do something for my people, the people I've come from. Well, now that kind of thing doesn't happen nearly as much. The people on the ground who are expected to vote, remember it's only 30-something% voted in our last election, 35% voted for the Labour Party. Remember that they have to vote for someone to represent them, and they don't have people who've lived their lives under their conditions and understand the questions that are their questions. Once that gap opens up, representative government is no longer representative government. It's notionally that, but the people don't feel represented by posh people who have privileges and drive around in big cars, and that's where the trouble comes from. It's happening in America, it's happening here, it's happening across Europe.
I think it's a very important issue that you brought up in terms of how the governments are um, losing touch with normal people, with ordinary people, and ordinary people are always the majority in the country, in any country.
Of course they are.
And it's important to always stay in touch. But besides that, I think, at least as far as I remember, the Democratic Party has always been the party for the people, for the middle class. But it seemed to me, and it has been proven by statistics in the last election, a lot of people, even though they still hold a majority on Hispanics, on young people, on black voters, it was proven that a lot of those voters still shifted to Donald Trump. Did that happen because of because they were tricked by his rhetoric, or because of the opposition party was?
Well, I think that let's step back from that just a little bit, because I think that we have over the decades evolved what I call, we used to have working class, middle class, and upper class as our class system. Now we've got unclassified people. They're below working class because they don't work. We've got 10 million people in Britain who don't work, who just draw benefits.
And still get benefits.
And then you've got your working people, and then you've got another class above it. It used to be the aristocracy, but now it's the political class. And I think the political class has lost its rootage in the ordinary affairs of the country that they represent. And that is a danger. Now, of course, there are exceptions to all of this, so I have to just throw that in. There are some exceptions. But on the whole, when politicians speak or go off to international conferences, or the press report them sort of doing this or saying that or the other, people say, well, so what? So what? I mean, touching people's lives. Let me just give you an analogy from my profession. I'm a Methodist minister. I'm a preacher. When I started, the whole job was pastoral. Namely, a number of people used to come to my church, and what would I do? I'd go and visit them in their homes. I'd go to the schools where their children were educated. When they had problems, they came to me and I helped them to solve it. In other words, I was in the community, part of the community, trusted by the community. What's happening now? It's become unfashionable on the whole for people who are Methodist ministers to visit people in their homes, to conduct a pastoral relationship. So they stand in a pulpit giving Bible studies from the pulpit, and the people sitting below them.
And it just seems ingenuine.
Well, it just seems, who are they? I mean, we don't know them like we used to know them. And the congregations have therefore diminished in size. People have lost their trust in the church, and so on and so forth. And it's easy to happen. I mean, for me, I can see all these things because my own beginnings were in poverty.
Yeah.
And I started with nothing, absolutely nothing. And I've had to struggle for every single step of the way. And so there's no doubt about the fact that I honestly, and in Haiti, when I went to Haiti, I didn't mix with the political class who were running the country and having revolutions. I mixed with the peasant people in the mountains who were unschooled.
And with the sheep.
No, well, there were no sheep. Oh, they were in the mountains. And they had no schools, they had no nothing. And I used to go up there, and they would allow me to sleep on one of their floors. And they taught me their language, they taught me their culture, they taught me their humanity. And suddenly I become somebody when I'm in a pulpit and they're in front of me, they say, he understands us. Now that's the link that we have to work to build again. Those people representing us understand us. And that you only understand people, not by reading books, but by going out to visit them, sharing their activities and their concerns. That's what I worry about, that we've lost that personal touch between rulers and ruled.
Yeah, but particularly with the US, I was wondering what caused that.
Yeah, well,
that crazy victory in terms of a win for a Republican president.
Well, I don't
winning
think,
popular vote
I don't
is
think the labels
pretty significant.
Republican and Democrat mean anything anymore. But in terms of the crazy result, which it certainly was, as I've already said, I don't think I can offer an understanding of it. But what Trump has managed to do is persuade those ordinary people that he does understand them. Because he speaks their language, he's rough like they are. He's not an intellectual. He's never been to university. He's the only man, they told me, who has written more books than he's read, which is an interesting way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it simply means he's persuaded them that he's one of us, and yet he's a billionaire who's conducted fraud, cooked his books. In South Korea, the poor president has had to resign from office for things less than that. But he's got away with it all because he's got this manner about him that has somehow, don't ask me how, but somehow got through that pain barrier and reached people who say, it's good to have someone who speaks like we speak, who knows us like that, instead of all this parading of political language and ideas and concepts that are above our heads and we don't understand them anymore.
Yeah, let's move a bit more to your to the work you're doing currently in the Parliament in the UK, because that's where you're mostly most qualified to speak on. And specifically, what infuriates people, as far as I know, with Labour so far, Labour government so far, would be their tax policies. How do you think that's an effective way of raising the revenue for the government, and which taxes are specifically effective?
Well,
for that?
All I can say is that yes, 2% on the national insurance was one way of raising more money, and they did it in the budget. Yes, they have found other ways of tinkering with the budget, but they're definitely not going to mess around with the fiscal rules in order just to get more money. But what they've done is that the money they've got has been given to improve the conditions of working people. So you've got a living wage that's been increased for ordinary working people, and you know that's and you know that I think that that's got to be good. But what's waiting to be done? You see, we've only been with the Labour government for 6 months.
Yeah, I think people are way too impatient.
Yes,
too impatient with governments in general.
That's right.
Not only Labour.
That's right. You're dead right. But before Labour could really build new structures and find a way forward, they had first of all to clear the ground of all the mess that they inherited. And at the moment, we're at the stage of clearing the ground that they inherited. And, you know, in the meantime, of course, people are impatient to see the health service improved, jobs improved, and it's at a time of economic downturn, not just for Britain, but for the world. China reported just today, this morning, growth of 5% last year. Now you think, well, what we die to have 5% growth in our economy, but in China, it's the worst they've had for decades, and they're worried about it. There's a downturn in the economy, and it's not a good time for rescuing a situation, and that's what the Labour Party are trying to do. I keep on saying to people, in a year's time, let's have the conversation you're trying to have now, because it's only then that we'll see if the policies have produced firm ground upon which we can build structures and look for a better future.
What are once again the problems that the Labour government has inherited from the previous Conservative rule throughout like 20 years, I think, around 20 years it was.
14 years, yes.
Yeah.
Right, yes. No, well, that's true.
Except for the migration and hotels problems that you have already mentioned.
Yeah. No, I think that, well, it's just that the Labour government at the moment finds itself in exactly the place that the Labour government elected for Tony Blair in 1997 had. Namely, you've got schools that are falling down, they've got bad concrete in them, they were built badly, and hundreds of schools need to be reconstructed. You have hospitals that need to be modernized. And although Boris Johnson said that he had 44 new hospitals he was going to deliver, he delivered none of them. So you've got all the building, you've got all the repairing, you've got all of that to do. What's happening now is similar to what was happening when Tony Blair was elected in 1997. And remember, he had nearly 200 majority. But what did he find? He found that the finances that the previous Conservative, they'd been there for 13, 14 years, had completely ruined. He found that in 5 years of government, with a massive majority, he spent tons of money, and it was on repairing schools, which had been allowed to deteriorate under the previous administration, and hospitals, and other infrastructural elements, and so on. So at the end of 5 years, the people looked and said, well, what has he done? Because you couldn't see it. The schools were still there. You couldn't see an improved school. Now, it's happening again that Keir Starmer has to invest money in schools whose concrete was badly done. He has a Grenfell Tower to reimburse all the people who were damaged by that, and a post office scandal and a blood scandal generating billions of indebtedness, which the government's going to have to repay. The hospitals are falling down, and all of that is needing his attention to pump money in to prop up what will show very little. The difference between Tony Blair's time and now is that Tony Blair came in when there was an economic boom. Now we're in a time of depression worldwide, not Britain, globally. And so Keir Starmer is having to do the same things as Tony Blair, but without help from the economy. And that seems to make it much worse. So people are going to have to be patient. They're going to have to wait and see. In a year's time, perhaps we'll see the green shoots, the beginnings. If the foundations are solid, you can build on it. And I'm hoping that the foundations he's laying, problematic as they are, and I accept that, but they are in the direction we need to go to make them solid so that we can begin then to put structures, growth on top of it, and begin to show something in the 5 years after that. That's what I think is going to happen.
As a sort of final question, of course, the Conservative Party, after a big loss in the election, has to reshape a bit, and they have chosen a new leader, Kemi Badenoch. What do you think about Kemi Badenoch? Because to me, she represents this kind of new idea of culture wars, and she's an interesting way to approach Conservative Party.
Yeah, well, it's
certainly different leadership than
I'm just
usually.
interested in the last 25 years of the Conservative Party and the number of leaders they have elected. It was about 8. I mean, you know, they go
fast.
on, and because they leave the choice of leader to the membership. The membership, on the whole, are old age pensioners like me drinking coffee or beer and choosing the new leader of their Conservative Party. But as far as Kemi Badenoch is concerned, she recognizes that the Conservative Party made mistakes. She said so in a public speech. She's admitted to the fact they got it wrong, and they must now learn the lessons of getting it wrong so they don't do it all over again when they come into power. On immigration, I've always found it, both with her and with Priti Patel, with James Cleverly, people from second or third generation immigrants who are as tough on immigration as they've been. I mean, I find it extraordinary. Rishi Sunak comes from a very wealthy thing, so they can pay their way in any old time. But Kemi Badenoch and James Cleverly and Priti Patel, all of them, you go back a couple of generations, and they all came here as migrants in order to improve their lives. Good, wonderful. But why are they now so hard on migrants themselves? I find it difficult. My contemporary at school was a man called Michael Howard. He was a leader of the Conservative Party for a while. And Michael is a Jew, and his parents fled from, I think, Romania at the time the Nazis were rising, and found secure accommodation here, well, in Wales, where I come from. He was at school with me. And so I find it hard that he was Home Secretary with one of the harshest regimes the Conservatives have ever produced on migration and on crime. I don't understand it. So it's not just in America with Donald Trump that I don't understand. It's also here. I don't understand all of these things.
Well, I hate to stop the conversation here, but I'm afraid we're running out of time. But thank you so much for your time, and it has been a pleasure to have you on.
It's been a pleasure, Volodymyr.